Hello and welcome to And Now You Know on Peninsula Area Public Access. I'm Dale Wilson, your host. Today our guest is Dr. John Merton Mars, who is a local retired journalist, educator, and editor, and one of the most savvy people you'll meet in local politics, second only probably to Mike Daugherty. So today we're going to talk a little bit about local politics, and then we're going to move to the national stage and talk about the upcoming presidential election. So without further ado, let me introduce John Merton Mars and ask you this question. Who's going to run for county commissioner in the Clallam County race?
Well, there's two that I know about who have basically declared themselves, although you don't sign up to do it officially until May. But a man named Kenneth Riondo, who has lived in Port Angeles all his life, I believe, has been attending the county commissioner meetings over and over, and is interested in running. And Maggie Roth, who ran against Mike Chapman last time, has told me that she's going to run. So that's two. And now Maggie is a Republican and Kenneth Riondo is a Democrat. There's also a lot of speculation that Sherry Kidd, the vice mayor of Port Angeles, is going to enter the race. It's not known whether Sherry would consider herself a Republican or a Democrat. She has attended some Democratic events. I think she is also close to a lot of Republicans. So I'm not sure if she would enter as a Republican or a Democrat or an independent, and if she decided to enter. The other party I know of is a former commissioner named Ron Richards, and he has discussed the possibility of running. He said that he would not run against Mike Chapman, but now that Mike has made it clear that he's not running for re-election, Ron might be reconsidering.
Is the county commission a partisan race? Do you run by?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, right.
And would you care to handicap that field that you just mentioned to suggest their chances of success?
It's hard to do. Maggie Roth is a real strong known entity among the county's Republicans. She's a precinct committee officer for the Republicans. She was on the Charter Review Commission. She ran against Chapman last time. So a lot of people are used to a lot of name recognition for Maggie. Kenneth Riondo, of course, would be completely a new person. I've only met him. I don't know anything else about him yet. I know that he's a retired mill worker at Nippon, and that he's very interested, and that's all I know.
Now, this time will be the first time in the history of Clallam County that county commissioners will be elected by district only. How will that impact this race?
It should make a difference. We don't know exactly how, of course, but the people in Sequim and the people in Forks and the people in western Port Angeles will not be voting on this commissioner choice. The district basically runs from the valley, the truck route down the valley on the west, out toward Mount Pleasant and almost to Sequim on the east. And it's pretty broad territory. Maggie Roth lives out in the Mount Pleasant area. I believe Kenneth Riondo lives in the city. Sherry Kidd obviously lives in the city. Ron Richards lives out in the rural area. There may very well be other candidates that we haven't heard from.
Now, my understanding is that this district is almost 50% inside the city limits and 50% in the county.
I'd say that's about right, yeah.
Do you think those two demographics play very much into the county commission race, city-county?
Well, from my observation, if there's a liberal base in Clallam County, it's Port Angeles, and so and I say that despite the fact that Mike Chapman got elected previously as a Republican and then as an independent. He's now a Democrat, as you probably know. But Mike Chapman, the reason he left the Republican Party is because the Republicans grew disaffected with him, and he has eventually come to the decision that he's more of a Democrat, much more of a Democrat than a Republican, than he ever was a Republican anyway. And I think the voters probably were sensing that. I think that you have a situation where people on the liberal side or the moderate side probably have a pretty strong chance. If Maggie Roth is perceived as a moderate, she's probably got a strong chance too. Sherry Kidd is some people tell me have the opinion that Sherry is toxic right now because of the fluoride debate that centers around the Port Angeles City Council. So I don't know if Sherry decides to pursue this what she's going to wind up with. If she decides to run as an independent, she's got a even bigger uphill battle, because Brian Monahan showed in our last commissioner's election in District 3 what happens when you run as an independent. You don't have any party support.
And of course, regardless of party participation, the top 2 vote getters in the primary will go on to the general
That's
election.
right.
Is that correct?
That's right. So it's theoretically possible for 2 people from the same party, or for a party member and an independent, to wind up as the final 2. It hasn't happened yet.
Now, you recall back in '92 when Ross Perot jumped into the presidential race,
Right.
he probably gave Bill Clinton the race, and I think he won with 37% of the general election.
Right.
So
A lot of people think that, and a lot of people believe that Ralph Nader gave George Bush the election. And
I wouldn't argue with that.
that's right. Right.
On the local scene, what are the big issues that are facing county government that these candidates should be taking into consideration and perhaps campaigning on?
Well, one issue is still the Carlsberg sewer project. The county commission is going ahead with that. There's still a lot of people who have big questions about that. And I expect that as that project starts to take place and they start to actually break some ground, that it's going to become controversial again. And it won't surprise me at all. The Trust Lands Advisory Committee on the possible reconveyance of trust lands to county ownership may very well become a major issue. And then we have the ongoing conflict between the county treasurer and the county commission. At one point, I believe that the treasurer, Celinda Barkhouse, was going to be happy with the fact that Jim McIntyre was no longer a county commissioner and that Mark Ozias had replaced him. But now it's not at all clear that she is satisfied or happy. She's had some recent communication with Ozias that I understand was troubling and difficult. So we have yet to see what will happen there. So we could wind up with some new controversy about the county budget.
Well, as you know, the treasurer, Celinda Barkhouse, had or in an email I think that she sent to the county commissioners, she suggested that they have all their ducks in a row as far as the finances that it's going to take to pay for this. I think it's up to $12 million now. And I think what they're doing is a pump station that's going to pump sewer from Carlsberg over to Squim and let them run it through their water treatment plant. But also understand that when this was first, the Carlsberg sewer was first being discussed, it was predicated in 2008 on an increase in population for that area. And since the meltdown of the economy, the actual population has dropped off by 10 or 12%. And there are a lot of people in that area saying there's no longer need for that.
Yeah, it's true. Former county commission candidate Brian Fraser said that part of the problem, and I think this problem probably feeds into that problem of declining population, is water wells failing in the area. And so I don't know how that factors into all this. Then you add that huge PUD development, their new administrative headquarters, right smack dab in the middle of that area, and I don't know how that factors in either. It's pretty complex.
The ongoing tussle between the treasurer and the commission, I think that the most recent salvo is that there is created within county government a hostile working relationship that is becoming troublesome for the county treasurer. Do you see that happening, or do you see that?
Well, I think her discomfort centers on her relationship with the county administrator, Jim Jones, and I don't know if anything will change there. I have not heard anything, and we haven't seen anything in terms of expressions by any of the commissioners that they are interested in changing Mr. Jones' status.
Mr. Jones has a unique status. He's, I've heard it said that he is one of the most well-paid individuals in the county, and yet he only has to please 2 voters, and that's the two,
right.
Any 2 voters, or any 2 of the county commissioners
right.
that seek his favor. If you were going to run for county commission, what would be the one thing that you would stick to and try to get everybody to climb onto? What one proposal or idea?
Well, I'm basically feeling pretty strong in favor of the path that Chapman and Ozias are taking about restoring, and restoring may be too strong of a word, but sticking with the budgetary solidarity and security that was established when Theringer and Doherty and Chapman were the commissioners. They had a budget that year after year stayed within its bounds, did not spend money they didn't have, and kept the reserves. They established and maintained reserves at a time when other counties were not able to do that. And if they're able to keep doing that, that's a substantial achievement.
Well, it did serve us well in the economy breakdown in the last few years.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with Dr. John Mars and more, and Now You Know. And welcome back to Now You Know for Peninsula Area Public Access. Our guest is Dr. John Mars, and we're going to discuss, we just got through talking a little bit about county politics. We're going to move over to the national level and talk about the Donald Trump show. Well, that's what it seems to have been for the last few months. John, tell us what you think about the national scene in politics right now.
Well, like many other pundits, I predicted some months ago that Donald Trump would fade away after the first couple of primaries.
You and many others, yes.
And so what's become obvious is that the game has changed. It's not the same political game that we've all been used to for these years, and Trump is capitalizing on that. One of the things he's realized is that there's a lot of voters who don't care about the details. They don't care if he doesn't explain how he's going to do something. They only care about the mood or the attitude. And so he's succeeding with attitude alone, because he rarely says how he's going to do anything.
Well, he's given no policy descriptions whatsoever. He just said, we're going to make America great. We're
That's
going
right.
to have the Mexicans build that wall, and they're going to pay for it.
Right. And how is he going to make the Mexicans pay for it?
Nobody's asked him so far that
That's
I know
right.
of. How does he get by? What has he tapped into here?
He's tapped into that anti-establishment feeling. He's tapped into some angst about this feeling that the country is not going anywhere, that we're moribund, and the reality from some points of view, of course, is that the reason we're moribund is because the Republican Party is refusing to cooperate with anything. That's arguable if you're a Republican, obviously, but so Donald Trump is running as a Republican. Now, is Donald Trump really a Republican? That's part of the argument. His detractors among the Republicans say that he's a kind of Republican of convenience.
Well, you can appreciate that nobody could have destroyed the establishment Republican Party any better than Donald Trump.
That's true.
So if he was a Democrat in sheep's clothing or whatever you'd call it, then he would be doing exactly what any good Democrat would be trying to do, which would be just brushing them aside.
Right.
And does it in such unique and simple ways. It makes me wonder why nobody has done this before, at least in the television age. When he said that Jeb Bush was low energy, that stuck with him just like glue for the rest of his ill-fated campaign.
Yeah.
And he spent $130 million trying to get over that one low energy and never recovered.
And now he's labeled Ted Cruz as a liar, and Cruz is having a hard trouble getting over that. And especially since Cruz is running as a Christian conservative, capital C Christian, he's having trouble with that. And the next step, if Rubio actually challenges Trump at all, he's going to probably label Rubio as an empty vessel or something to that effect.
We talked about Ronald Reagan being a Teflon president, but if there's any such thing as a Teflon candidate, as you recall, right out of the chute, Trump was talking about the Mexicans coming over with drugs and rapists, but he got 44% of the Hispanic vote in Nevada.
Yeah.
How do you explain that?
I don't think it's explicable. I think it's just strange. He ran that advertisement, or somebody ran an advertisement for him, in which depicted people running across the border, and it wasn't Mexicans, it wasn't America, it was from Morocco or someplace else, and he got away with that. It's like, it doesn't matter.
So kind of like all those dark-skinned people.
He said it doesn't matter, and all of his supporters said it doesn't matter. So,
well, in fact, nothing he has said mattered. He said that he could shoot somebody down in the streets
Yeah.
of Manhattan and it wouldn't affect him. And I bet that's true. He threatened to, or didn't threaten, but he said that he would like to punch out one of the protesters.
Right.
And
Right.
that sort of incivility,
Right.
it seems to bring more people onto his side. So is this going to be the new normal for national politics?
You know, he's not acting presidential, what we would call presidential, and he's getting away with it. So we don't know, do we? If he winds up running as the nominee against, let's say, Hillary Clinton, it's going to be a very interesting contest because Hillary Clinton is spot on details and specifics and debating.
Well, I agreed. Hillary is what they used to call a policy wonk, and she probably has binders on everything
Right.
that might be
Yeah.
questioned. Yet she is suffering very much from a lack of trust.
Yes, right.
And that would come along with being on the public scene for so long, but there are also situations that have come up in the time that she's been on the scene. The Vince Foster death, the land deal back in Arkansas. There's a lot of things that have stuck to her that have never been fully explained, and even up to the server for her emails not being in the State Department, where she was a State Department employee, but being in the basement of her house there in New York. So is she going to be able to overcome this trust factor?
For what, the nomination?
For the nomination.
For the nomination, I think she overcomes that because Bernie Sanders has some baggage that he can't escape, which is primarily his own creation by declaring himself to be a socialist. And while a lot of people are drawn to that, especially a lot of young people, you know, in Clallam County, we've got a lot of Bernie supporters in Clallam County, and they are not all young people. I have talked to females who've come up to me and told me, mature females have said that there are no conditions under which they will ever support Hillary Clinton. So there's something going on there. But on balance, she seems to have more support than Bernie Sanders does nationally. And gosh, at this point, I hate to make predictions because I've been wrong so many times, but I'll be surprised if Bernie Sanders can win the nomination.
Taking Bernie Sanders aside for just a second here, and talking about democratic socialism, public schools would be considered democratic socialism because that's the government teaching your schools. Medicare, Medicaid,
That's right.
Obamacare,
Social Security.
Social Security. All of these are democratic socialism concepts, but nobody seems to be too concerned about those. What's the beef against democratic socialism?
Well, the definition of socialism includes the common ownership of property. That's the textbook definition. And that's what people on the right in particular are really worried about, is that if Bernie Sanders actually achieved a socialist government, that we would have social programs that would result in higher taxes and more common property ownership rather than less government ownership. And so it's, you know, we've had the label for a long time now, warnings of creeping socialism. Well, in Bernie's case, it's going to be perceived as galloping socialism.
You know, a lot of the Nordic countries, the European countries, have been able to figure out ways to make universal health care a reality,
right.
And kindergarten to graduate studies free of charge.
Right.
And we are the most industrialized country, the largest industrialized country in the world. Why can't we find a way to offer kindergarten to graduate school education and universal health care? I mean, and one thing that I firmly agree with Bernie, and that is that health care should be a right.
Yes, but you're comparing apples and oranges when you're talking about Europe and the other Western countries, because they do not have, none of them has a military that eats up $1 trillion a year.
Okay, let's go on that. Do we need a military that is larger than the next 9 countries combined after us? And why couldn't we just be contractors let them pay us their military budget and we'll protect them?
That has curiously become an emotional issue for some reason. It's no longer in the realm of objectivity or analysis. It's like if people are on one position, they want security and they want the United States to be the dominant military force in the world, and we're not strong enough, even though we've got 11 nuclear aircraft carriers and nobody else has more than 2, and so on and so forth. We just had this overwhelming military, and that's even after Robert Gates, during the Barack Obama administration, cut back on the Pentagon budget, because Gates's position is that we are no longer viable to fight World War II and the other historic wars. We're fighting a new enemy, and that new enemy does not require 11 nuclear armadas for the aircraft carriers and whatever number of nuclear submarines we have. The position that Gates argued was not that we need to get rid of all of them, but we don't need to have more. We need at the very most to maintain what we've got, and we can probably afford to cut back on that. But you know, Gates was a Republican working for Barack Obama and achieved some cutbacks in the Pentagon budget, and now Obama is being blamed for cutting back on the Pentagon budget. It's a crazy political world.
I think the Pentagon maybe agree with Gloria Vanderbilt, who once said, "Too much is never enough." We'll be right back with more Now You Know on Papa, Peninsula Area Public Access. And we're back on Now You Know on Peninsula Area Public Access. Our guest today is Dr. John Mars, who is telling us and handicapping some of the races in the local Cullum County scene and also on the national scene. So now back to the Donald Trump show, if you will. Is anyone else tired of that name? And we're only in the very early stages of and maybe he's just doing this to build the Trump brand. What do you think? Do you think he really wants to be president?
Gosh, how do we know? He's pursued it this far. He hasn't dropped out. He must have reached the point where he really wants to be president. I don't think you could I don't think you could be so cynical as to say at this point that he doesn't want to be president.
Well, I think he's having more fun than any of the other candidates. Maybe all of them put together.
Yeah, that could be. That could be. And of course, you know, we're sitting here in Port Angeles, Washington, and we don't get to see these people up close and personal. We're getting it all filtered through the electronic media, and so we don't. There may be things happening out there in the social media that are beyond anything we can grasp by remote control. I mean, the social media can get really bizarre. For instance, there has been some recent attention paid in the Twitter sphere to somebody's notion that Ted Cruz is the Zodiac Killer. Even though Ted Cruz was born after the Zodiac Killer's last killing. So it's just, there's no way to predict what's going to happen. One of the interesting things to me, and it's a question I played with a little bit, I haven't been able to make anything out of it, is that the Republicans are going to have their convention before the Democrats have theirs. And that means that when the Democrats gather in their national convention, they're going to know who the nominee is for the Republicans. Will that make a difference?
Well, realistically speaking, by that time, won't the Republicans have a pretty good idea of who will be the Democratic nominee as well?
Theoretically, both conventions will convene with a majority of delegates pledged to one candidate. But that's theoretical. One of the things that's happened so far, especially in the Republican primary, where we have so many candidates, is that Donald Trump has never achieved a majority anywhere. The highest he's come was, I think, 44% in Nevada. That means that if Marco Rubio or someone else could succeed in coalescing the anti-Trump vote, they could theoretically take over and win some of the later primaries. And they might come into a convention. It's what they call a brokered convention is still a possibility.
Tell us what a brokered convention means.
Brokered convention is where nobody can get enough votes on the first ballot to get the nomination. And then after the first ballot, when that occurs, the delegates can change their votes.
After the first ballot? After
the first ballot. And so unless they change the rules, they can always change the rules by majority vote in the convention. But if they stick with those rules, then it's after that first ballot, people would start making deals. And anything could happen at that point, including the possibility that Michael Bloomberg would enter the picture.
If I'm not mistaken, Abraham Lincoln was elected on the third ballot in a brokered convention back in, 1860?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
With all these different moving parts, we've got, I think we started out with 17 Republicans on that side. Now we're down to, I don't know how many. But the major ones now are, I think, Rubio and Cruz. And compare and contrast those two. Let's leave the Donald out of this for a second. What about Cruz and Rubio, and why didn't they do any better with the Hispanics if we assume that everybody is tribalist and we vote for people that look most like us? What are their campaigns?
Well, one of the interesting things in terms of the Hispanic vote and the Latino vote is that both Cruz and Rubio are the children of Cuban parents.
Right.
And although, as has been pointed out over and over, Ted Cruz's mother is an American citizen, was at the time of his birth.
Now they're going to do this birther thing on him too.
Well, Trump has.
Because he was born in
Trump
Canada.
He was born in Canada, that's right. And there's no doubt that he was born in Canada. It's not a fiction. It's not like it was in the Obama case. It's a known fact. But the point is that his mother was an American citizen, and by his argument and the argument about a lot of political people, that is tantamount to natural born citizen. Some others have pointed out that question has never been raised to the Supreme Court.
Well, Cruz keeps saying it's settled law, but there are, in fact, there's a couple of law professors who've come out and said it's not settled law.
That's right. It's not.
And they didn't necessarily have a decision on it.
Right.
They just merely said it is not
Right,
settled
right,
law.
right.
And do we have any doubt that Trump would file a lawsuit if Cruz
Cruz got the nomination,
or even came close to being the nominee?
It's possible. It's possible. Trump has enough money to pursue that if he wants to. The thing that fascinates me about Ted Cruz is that he's an extreme ideologue. He's pushing his Christian philosophy. He's tying Christianity to conservative republicanism in a way that no other candidate is doing. And considering our First Amendment and the establishment clause having to do with religious freedom, I think that Ted Cruz's candidacy is troublesome. I would not like to see a Ted Cruz be a nominee of any party in this election.
I've just never seen him look like he was having a good time. He always seems like he's just a little bit sad about something. What about Rubio?
Rubio is an interesting person. He's personable. He's good looking. He's youthful. He seems vigorous, but as Governor Christie showed in one of the debates, he might actually be an empty vessel.
A little robotic there.
A little robotic, as somebody who doesn't have as Gertrude Stein once said about Oakland, there's no there there.
Right.
Rubio's a one-term senator. He doesn't have much of a track record. Some of the things in his track record are debatable among the Republicans.
Well, there's going to be some backlash on him too, because he was supposed to be the understudy for Jeb Bush.
Right.
I think a lot of people would agree that Jeb Bush helped him rise to the station that he did in Florida, Speaker of the House, I think. And then there are those who say that he put a knife in the Bush machine when he decided to try and leapfrog over Bush for the presidency.
If I was to take a wild plunge here, and I think I will, I think that Trump has more to worry about from John Kasich and Michael Bloomberg than he does from either Cruz or Rubio.
Well, now I agree. I think John Kasich has put more on the table than any of the candidates so far. Now, I do think he shot himself in the foot recently when he went back and, I guess to prove his mettle or something, defunded Planned Parenthood in Ohio.
Right.
So I don't think that helped him in his national stature, but I think he's maybe planning on running for re-election of governor in Ohio just in case. So he's trying to cover all the bases back there.
You'll notice that since that grand jury in Texas came down against the Planned Parenthood criticizers and indicted them
for
falsifying stuff. We haven't heard anything about Planned Parenthood anymore from the Republican candidates.
But then Texas also dropped the charges against their former governor, Rick Perry, for whatever it was he was charged with back there. So this was a strange year because that's the first time that a presidential candidate under indictment has been presidential candidate?
You know, I spent 9 years in Alaska, and I interviewed governors, and a lot of legislators, and I was pretty involved in political coverage up in Alaska. And Alaskan politics are not like the rest of the country, and I think that Texas is in the same category. I think that Alaska and Texas have their own political realities, and that they are not comparable to other states.
So how about this? Rick Perry and the former governor, what's her name?
Sarah Palin.
Sarah Palin. We've come to an end of our time. We've certainly enjoyed having this discussion, and we do hope you'll come back for another version of Now You Know. And we want to thank all the crew here at the Skill Center for all of their production capabilities. And thank you for watching Peninsula Area Public Access. I'm Dale Wilson, your host for Now You Know.